20 Wilderness Survival Skills Your Great-Grandmother Knew, by age 12, that seasoned backcountry adults have completely forgotten. Your great-grandmother didn't survive the wilderness because she read a survival manual. She survived because the wilderness was simply where she lived. But here's what will surprise you. The skill that would save her life in a true emergency wasn't fire starting or knot tying. It was something far more psychological, something we've systematically trained out of ourselves. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that hidden skill is, and why modern preppers spend thousands on gear, trying to replace what costs nothing at all. If you've ever spent time around people who actually work the land, ranchers, loggers, old-timers who trap for a living, you notice something strange. They're not worried, not constantly anyway. They move through uncertainty with a kind of calm that looks almost careless, until you realize it's the opposite. It's the deepest form of preparedness. Subscribe to this channel, because we're about to unpack something that changes how you think about survival completely. And if you've experienced this kind of calm yourself, or you grew up around someone who had it, drop a comment below. I want to hear your story about that person who never seemed rattled. Wait, this part is crucial, and I need your full attention for just a moment. Everything I'm about to walk you through, the real mechanisms behind these forgotten skills, and why they shaped an entirely different kind of human being, that's all broken down in the complete survival guide we've published. You'll find it in the description and pinned right at the top of the comments. It's a paid resource, but it goes far deeper than what fits in a video, and it's worth your time if you're serious about understanding this. Let's start with something nobody thinks about. Your great-grandmother could sit still, not meditate-style sitting, not yoga class breathing. She could wait, for hours, in discomfort, without distraction, without the urge to fix it or escape it. She would sit by a snare, watching for movement, sit by a fever-sick sibling, changing cloths in the dark, sit in a cold cabin during a winter that stretched from November into April. That skill, the ability to remain mentally present during extended discomfort without psychological collapse, that was foundational. It's what made everything else possible. Today's survival training focuses on action. Build a shelter, make a fire, find water. These are real, necessary skills. But we've almost entirely lost the capacity for patient endurance. We treat discomfort as an emergency. A cold that lasts 3 days feels like a crisis. Being alone with our thoughts for 30 minutes feels dangerous. Your great-grandmother's world didn't give her a choice. The weather was coming whether she felt ready or not. The harvest happened on its schedule, not hers. The second forgotten skill was something called productive patience. It's different from just waiting. It's the ability to do repetitive, somewhat boring work for extended periods, without resentment, without checking the clock, without wondering if there's something more worthwhile you could be doing. She would card wool for hours, or churn butter until her shoulders ached, or dig in the garden until her back screamed. The work wasn't stimulating. It wasn't building a sense of progress you could see on a screen, but it was necessary. The family ate because someone did this work. The clothing existed because someone spent days making it. Modern survival skills training treats the essential work as a means to an end. Start the fire so you can cook, build the shelter so you can survive the night. But your great-grandmother understood something deeper. The work itself was the practice. The repetition built something in her. Calluses, yes, but also competence that went bone deep. When an emergency came, she wasn't discovering how to do these things for the first time. She'd done them hundreds of times in conditions good and bad. The third skill we've lost entirely was something I'll call inherited problem solving. Your great-grandmother didn't innovate. She inherited methods. Her mother taught her how to preserve meat, and her mother had learned from her mother. These techniques had been tested across generations. They worked because they'd been refined by decades of trial and error, all the expensive mistakes made and learned from before she was born. We've inverted this completely. Modern survival culture rewards innovation, personalization, finding your own way. We're suspicious of old methods. We want to understand the principles so we can improve on them. Sometimes that's good. Mostly it means every person repeats the learning curve instead of standing on the shoulders of ancestors. Your great-grandmother inherited not just knowledge, but the humility that came with it. She knew that smarter people than her, people who cared about her survival, had already figured this out. The fourth loss traces back to something most modern survivalists never consider: the role of continuous, embedded practice. Your great-grandmother didn't practice fire starting on weekends. She didn't schedule monthly wilderness trips. She lived in the wilderness. Her kitchen was a wilderness. Her livestock required wilderness knowledge daily. The skills didn't exist in isolation, waiting to be dusted off when needed. They were woven into ordinary work. A 12-year-old girl milking cows at dawn wasn't thinking about survival. She was doing chores. But during those 20 minutes with her hands in cold water and the cow shifting beneath her, she was learning pressure points, rhythm, animal behavior, weather reading from the sky above the barn. Learning happened while doing. That's radically different from watching tutorials or attending a weekend class. Modern people think of survival skills as discrete units. You learn knots on one Tuesday, fire starting on another Tuesday, water purification the following month. You master each skill separately and assume they'll somehow integrate when needed. They won't. Not under pressure. Not when you're cold or scared or tired. Your great-grandmother's competence came from layering. She practiced knots while fixing equipment. She practiced fire judgment while cooking daily meals. She practiced reading weather while tending animals. Everything reinforced everything else. The muscle memory, the pattern recognition, the calm. It accumulated without her consciously accumulating it. That's how you move from knowing something to being something. This is why modern survival courses often fail. You can teach someone how to build a shelter in 3 days. What you can't teach is the judgment about when to stop searching for perfect materials and accept good enough. That judgment comes from repetition in real stakes, not in a controlled environment where failure means embarrassment, not hypothermia. The fifth skill, and this one might surprise you, was what I'd call failure tolerance. Your great-grandmother expected to fail regularly. The butter churn would separate wrong. The rope would slip. The fire would go out. These failures happened in a context where they mattered, where they had consequences, but where consequences were manageable because they happened constantly, in small doses. You learned from each one immediately. Today we've engineered most failure out of normal life. You don't fail at turning on the stove. You don't fail at keeping your water clean. Modern infrastructure absorbs the cost of our incompetence. We rarely experience the low-stakes failures that would teach us judgment and resilience. When these same people venture into the backcountry, they carry modern gear designed to fail as late as possible. They encounter a problem they've never seen before, perhaps a blister that's infected, or a rope that won't hold weight, or water that looks clean but makes them sick, and they panic. Not because they lack knowledge, but because they've never lived through a failure that required problem solving. They've never had to figure out what to do when the textbook solution isn't available. Before we continue deeper into what these skills actually were, I need you to hold one thing in mind. The real story here isn't that your great-grandmother was tougher than you. It's that she was shaped by a different relationship with stakes. Everything she did mattered immediately and visibly. There's no way to understand these skills without understanding that context. And if you want to understand the deeper mechanics of how competence actually develops, the patterns that separate people who can genuinely survive from people who think they can, I've written a detailed guide on this that breaks down each layer. It's in the description and pinned in the comments. The guide goes into the psychology of embedded learning, how to build real resilience, and what separates inherited skill from memorized fact. The sixth skill was navigation without instruments. Your great-grandmother could navigate her territory without a map or compass. She knew the land by movement through it. She understood how creeks drained, where ridges ran, which trees grew in which soil. She navigated by pattern recognition developed through hundreds of journeys on the same paths. This wasn't mystical. She simply paid attention. Walking to the mill, she noticed which side of the oak the moss preferred. Checking traps, she memorized how the hill pitched and where the dangerous ground lay. Over years, that accumulated into a spatial knowledge so complete she could navigate at night or in fog. Most modern people navigate visually, and they navigate with devices. We've lost the skill of reading landscape as story. Number 7 involved something the military now pays thousands to teach soldiers: water sourcing and purification without modern filters. A girl of 12 knew where water was safe. She could read a landscape and know which streams ran clear from springs versus which collected runoff from higher ground. She understood that still water meant danger. Moving water, especially water that moved fast over rocks, carried less disease. She also knew the plants that signaled good water. Where watercress grew, the source was pure. Where certain trees clustered, groundwater lay close. She carried cloth for straining and knew which roots, when boiled with water, would kill what couldn't be seen. Willow bark, birch leaves. These weren't remedies she read about. They were survival knowledge passed mother to daughter, repeated until the hands remembered what the mind had learned. Today's backpacker carries a $30 filter that breaks in wet conditions. That 12-year-old carried cloth and plant knowledge. Both worked. One cost nothing and never failed. Number 8 was shelter construction in varied conditions. Not just building a shelter, but building the right shelter for the season and the emergency. A summer shelter needed ventilation and protection from insects. Winter required insulation and heat retention. A shelter built in panic looked nothing like one built with knowledge. She knew which wood split cleanly for frames, which bark peeled in strips wide enough to shed rain, which locations offered natural windbreaks or south-facing warmth. A girl who could build a functional shelter in 2 hours, using only what the forest offered, was considered merely competent. Most of us would require a tent, tools, and instruction. That girl had something more valuable. She had experience that became instinct. Before we continue deeper into this, I need to tell you something important. The actual mechanics of why these skills worked the way they did, why certain plants purified water better than others, why particular materials insulated more effectively. All of that gets explained in extraordinary detail in the Wilderness Survival Guide available through the link in the description and pinned at the top of the comments. It's the kind of resource that teaches you not just the what, but the full why behind each technique. Without that foundation, the skills stay surface level. With it, they become transferable knowledge you can apply in situations your great-grandmother never faced. Number 9 was rope work and knot tying. Not knowing one knot, knowing 15 or 20. Understanding which served which purpose, being able to tie them with one hand or in darkness. A clove hitch secured a tent line quickly. A bow line created a loop that wouldn't slip even under strain. A square knot joined 2 ropes safely. A timber hitch grabbed a log for dragging. These weren't academic skills. A failed knot meant a collapsed shelter in wind, a load that shifted during transport, an animal trap that released its catch. Mistakes carried consequences. She learned fast. By 10, her hands could form complex knots without conscious thought, muscle memory doing the work while her mind attended to something else. Number 10 brings us to hide preparation and leather work. When her family killed an animal for food, nothing disappeared. The hide became clothing, bags, shelter components. She learned to scrape hides clean, treating them with brains and smoke to create workable leather. This process took time, but required no special chemicals, just knowledge and patience. She could tan a hide in 3 weeks, using materials from the forest. Modern tanners use chrome and industrial processes. The result is similar. Her result cost nothing and happened from resources she gathered herself. These 10 skills formed the foundation. They weren't separate, they interconnected. Navigation led her to water sources. Water sources determined shelter location. Shelter location needed rope to secure and materials to build. Materials came from processing animals or plants, work that required knots and tools. Knowledge flowed into knowledge. Experience built on experience. A modern survivalist learns these sequentially. Take a fire course, then a shelter course, then navigation. They compartmentalize. Your great-grandmother learned them as integrated survival, woven into daily life from age 4 onwards, reinforced daily until age 12, when competence was expected. She couldn't separate them because they never existed separately. They were just how you lived. This is the revelation I promised you at the beginning. The reason those 12-year-olds could do what takes modern adults months to learn wasn't superior genetics or some lost secret technique. It was frequency, repetition. Daily, unavoidable practice starting in childhood. Your great-grandmother didn't attend a weekend survival retreat. She lived it. Every morning meant fire building. Every evening meant animal processing. Every season brought new plants to identify, new weather patterns to read. By age 12, she had lit over 4,000 fires, not 4. She had processed hundreds of animals, not dozens. She had traveled thousands of miles on foot across terrain she knew deeply. Modern survival instruction assumes you're starting from zero. A weekend workshop teaches you to read a map. A 3-day course teaches shelter building. That's because you have no baseline. Your great-grandmother's baseline started at 4 years old with simple fire tending. By 12, fire was muscle memory, not conscious thought. She could build one in conditions that would frustrate an experienced adult today. That integration matters more than any single skill. A person who knows how to tie a bowline but panics under stress will fail. A person who has tied 1,000 bowlines in routine conditions, in wind, in darkness, with cold hands, develops something deeper than knowledge. Call it competence. Call it confidence. Call it the difference between surviving and perishing. The second revelation follows from the first. Those skills didn't vanish because they became obsolete. They vanished because we stopped practicing them daily. We replaced daily necessity with convenience. Refrigeration replaced food preservation. GPS replaced navigation by stars and landmarks. Commercial clothing replaced the need to tan hides and sew repairs. We didn't lose the capacity to learn these skills. We lost the pressure that made them non-negotiable. That pressure shaped entire childhood patterns. A girl who failed to start a fire faced a cold breakfast and parental disappointment. A boy who couldn't tie a secure knot might lose tools or cargo. A young person who misidentified edible plants risked poisoning the family. Stakes were immediate and real. Failure had consequences. That changed behavior in ways no online course can replicate. Your great-grandmother at 60 could do what she learned at 12 because those skills never atrophied. She used them. Every week, every month, every year. Not as hobbies, as life. The muscle memory, the judgment, the intuition remained sharp because they were exercised constantly. A person who sews a garment once a decade will fumble. A person who mends clothes twice weekly will work without thinking. That's the uncomfortable truth. You cannot become truly competent in wilderness survival through occasional practice. You cannot take a 2-week course and expect to maintain those skills 5 years later without sustained engagement. Your great-grandmother had something we don't. A lifestyle that demanded competence as a condition of comfort, safety, and belonging within her community. That doesn't mean you've lost the capacity. It means the pathway is different. You cannot relive the 1910s. You cannot raise children in conditions where fire building is a daily requirement. What you can do is build structure. Choose one skill. Practice it weekly, not monthly. Start small. Master fire building over 8 weeks. Then move to water procurement. Then shelter. Give each skill the time childhood once provided, compressed into focused adult practice. The meaningful survival knowledge your great-grandmother carried wasn't mysterious. It wasn't locked in obscure books or held by secret societies. It was just the accumulated result of doing things repeatedly until they became automatic. That capability remains available. The choice is yours, whether to pursue it. Here's what you need to do this week. Pick one skill from what we've discussed. Not all of them. 1. Commit to practicing it once every 7 days for the next 8 weeks. Fire building, knot tying, plant identification, fire lay construction, whatever calls to you. Write it down, schedule it, do it. That single habit, sustained, will shift your perception of what's possible. Your great-grandmother's real gift wasn't exceptional ability. It was the understanding that competence comes from repetition, and repetition requires commitment. She had that commitment forced upon her. Yours must be voluntary. Make it anyway. Thank you for watching. If this perspective changed how you think about wilderness skills, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you catch every new video we release. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these forgotten skills you want to master first. Genuinely curious what calls to you.